This episode was recorded in mid-July of 2025. At the time of recording, federal adult education funding was frozen, and it was unknown whether the funding would be released. Since then, the funds have been released, and adult education received its full original federal award. While this brings much-needed good news, the future of federal adult education funding remains a fight. Therefore, even though some of the information shared in this episode is outdated, my goals remain the same. We hope you enjoy this episode of Connect with Adult Ed.
Hello and welcome to Connect with Adult Ed, the adult education podcast. I'm your host, Nadia and of course I'm joined by our co-host and producer, Jamie Trujillo.
Hi.
Yeah. So this is going to be our season 3 premiere of this podcast now. So we've been doing this for a little bit. We have, how many episodes do we have now?
I'm not 100% sure, but it has got to be close to 40. I mean, we used to do 2 a month, and then we went to 1 a month, and so maybe not 40. I might be grossly exaggerating.
I think it's like 30 something, because it's also when we put up the seasons on the website, we actually start over with the numbers. Maybe we should not. Maybe we should just keep it like a running tally so people know how much we worked on this. We have a lot of episodes now. So
hey, I don't mind changing that. I can do that.
Yeah, so I'll say anywhere between 25 and 40 something episodes. We'll figure that out later. It's not super important, but it's a milestone of sorts. It's something big. Yeah, so we're recording this in July. It is hot.
Mm-hmm.
As July it is usually in the desert. So what's new with you?
Well, I've taken some of that summertime to travel, have a little bit of vacation time, have a lot of fun. I've also had some work trips. So, I was in Denver. It was hot in Denver, but I was also in Vegas. As you can imagine, it was hotter in Las Vegas, Nevada, both for a work trip and for a vacation. So a lot of that. And it's actually been a busier summer than usual. And we'll, of course, talk more about that in a little bit. But it has been a very relaxing and at the same time very busy summer. And I am absolutely looking forward to another season of this podcast and getting to explore more topics and talk about more things. And again, we'll talk about that later. But what's new with you, Nadia?
So much. I'm still trying to really contextualize everything. So I went back home. I haven't been back to New York for a prolonged visit since I left in 2020. So it was 2 weeks back home, which was a really big deal for me because when I left New York, I was in what I now know is a state of extreme autistic burnout where it took so much energy to do so little, and I was just in constant pain at that time. So moving was really revolutionary for me. So how it worked out was the spring for a professional, well, for really anybody in our field, is really busy. So it was just one event after another. Then we had our Propel work retreat, which we call them a retreat, but it's all strategic planning. You're just talking and meeting and organizing and planning for 6 hours or more a day. Okay. It's a lot, right? So we do the retreat. It ends a half day on a Friday. So that was a lighter day. And then on Saturday, I flew to New York. So I didn't really get that transition time I needed. I was staying with my mom in Staten Island, New York. So it's the more suburban borough. But I literally took off. I was like, I'm not thinking about work. I'm going to try to reset. So I had to kind of figure out what that looks like, what that means. And it was kind of hard at first. But some of those days where I did nothing but walk around, I would take public transportation to Manhattan and just walk around my old neighborhoods I used to hang out in and just try all these different foods and coffee and go to these old places I haven't been to in years and seeing what's changed. It was revolutionary. It was amazing. I was worried going back because I was in a bad spot. So I was like, am I going to be in a bad spot again? I don't know. And then it turned out, no, actually, I feel like me in that space was great. And I realized I needed to leave, and I did great. I did good for myself. And now I'm like this kind of better version of myself in this place. It was amazing. Really excellent food. And great reconnecting with my family, got to know my nephews better, spent some really good quality time with them that I never got before. Especially one was born in April, so he's super new to the world. It's great. Then, of course, that last couple days, well, first of all, the weather was awful. I just want to put that out, okay? But it helps so much when you have nothing to do but whatever you want. That is what makes bad weather more tolerable, because it was so humid. I sweat through my clothes every single day. And my mom, being like the kind of type A caretaker that she is, was literally washing our clothes every single day. And I was like, you don't have to do that. But she was like, but you have clothes. And she just like could not figure that out. She's like, wow, you guys really go through a lot of laundry. I'm like, Mom, we're walking outside every day. And she just like could not put that together. And she just kept making that same comments. I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna have to deal with this. Minor annoyance. Anyway, weather was awful. Then it got better. Then I'm going home. At the airport, we get on the airplane and we're delayed for 4 hours because of bad weather in the Midwest that is preventing the for flying. But we were 4 hours on the airplane. So sitting on the airplane, waiting to get off. And then at some point, one of the passengers tells the crew, I don't trust this. I want to get off. So we had to go back to wherever we were, like waiting in line. So they had to drive the airplane back to the airport, have him get off. And then we had to go back in line and wait until they clear us off. So like a 4.5 hour flight from New York to Albuquerque with no stops was double the time because we had to wait on the airplane. It was
Wow.
awful. Yeah, I'd rather be in the airport, okay? I'd rather hang out, look at
Absolutely.
those really expensive stuff. The reason why I'm bringing all this up is because I'm sitting on the airplane, my butt hurts, my body hurts, and I'm just like, okay, I need to get home. I'm so glad I took the next day off. I was thinking ahead here. I was like, okay, I'm gonna fly back on this day. I'll get home at like, early evening, and I'll chill. And then the next day, I have a whole day to reset. And then the day after that, I'll go back to work, right? That's my thought. That's my plans. I'm excited. I'm like, okay, I'm reset after this stressful spring. I'm ready to get back into it. And then my phone dings, and I get an email from the state director of adult education in New Mexico, Amber Gallup, telling the entire field that the federal government is holding our funds. And we don't know what that means yet. And we were supposed to get the money to the next day, but we're not. And I was like, what is happening? Oh my goodness. And somehow made 8.5 hours on an airplane worse. Um,
Yeah.
Awful. Yeah. So then I was like, I immediately, instead of like that kind of transition mode, I immediately transitioned to, what could this mean? What is happening? Am I going to have a job when we land? I don't know. It was terrifying. And then also it got to a point where like, well, this is kind of like banal. This is a banal, terrifying experience. I'm bored, anxious, and bored. This is weird. So, that's kind of that long-winded story was basically like, okay, how do you reset when things just come so quickly and so out of place? Because I also, if I'm not mistaken, Amber was also on vacation,
Yep.
right?
And
So she had
that
to.
I think made it even worse. Just you know, and I do want to go back to a couple of the things you were saying because it's so ironic, and I doubt that we are the only ones that were in this position. I think a lot of people were on vacation, but I was also driving back from Denver when actually I missed a call from Amber when that happened. I was driving back, I missed that call, and then I got home and checked my email, and there it was. There was that email from Amber that the federal funds had been frozen, were not going to be dispersed. And like you, I was really trying to just reset. That was a total vacation. It was a once in a lifetime concert experience. My wife and I went to go see Metallica, 2 shows, no repeats, amazing bands. And it was Denver Pride. We were doing everything we could to just enjoy ourselves. I was not checking email. And it was a wonderful 4 days of just vacation. And then came back to that. It was very surreal to come back to that. And again, I don't think that we were alone in that. And to think that Amber, poor thing, was on vacation when she got that and was going into just panic mode right from the beginning. Same thing for me. I had planned on taking the next day off once we got back, and I didn't. I was on the phone with Amber. I was trying to make sure that there was a message sent out to programs about what we could do. There was an emergency COAB meeting called that very day. So the COAB board was trying to meet and figure out what would be the next steps. It was just kind of emergency action mode. And so, yeah, it was very strange. And of course, since then, because it's been roughly 2 weeks, it's been more and more and more changes. And by the time this airs, there's probably going to be a lot more that's changed.
Exactly. It's so hard to just have any kind of like even thinking about long-term planning because we have no clue what's really going on. And I do commend our state leaders and advocates that really jumped in and just right into, okay, we have to figure out what this means and to give people information as timely as possible, which I'm sure there was still that, that panic and that fear and that worry, even though we were getting updated as we could be, as much as we could be. But it was still nerve-wracking.
Definitely.
So that's where we're at right now of
That is where we are right now. But maybe we should take a step back first. Since this is the first episode of the new year, the new season, maybe we should just think back about last year.
Yeah. Okay. So thinking about right, because everything changed so quickly, really it's hard to even like that transition into really and do any reflection, which reflection is such an important key to our work. Yeah. So something that we wanted to do something for this episode. Why don't you, Jamie, talk a little bit about that? Like, what do we want? What is our theme today or a topic?
Well, again, to reiterate what you just said, reflection is such an important practice. It helps you to look at the things you've learned. It helps you to have gratitude for the good things, learn from the good and the bad things, and figure out how you want to move forward. And so, with this episode, what we're really wanting to do is to reflect on the last fiscal year. What were some highlights for us? What did we learn or take away from that? So that then we can look at the new fiscal year moving forward, what we're looking forward to, what projects or events we're looking forward to, the goals that we have. I think that the reflection is just such a key part of that. So we want to start with that reflection and then look to the future and give you all our listeners a little bit of a taste of what's to come. Not just with the podcast either, but in the field. What to look forward to as far as professional development offerings or other events, and what things can you do? Because
Mhm.
we, of course, are going to be talking a lot about the state of things with funding, with advocacy, and stuff like that. So,
Yes, all good points. So, thank you. Yes.
mhm.
Let's start off from the highlights that you mentioned. Like, what were some highlights of the last year? What was that for you?
I think one of the biggest highlights for me that has absolutely sent ripples into what's happening now is the success that we had in our last legislative session, which was January to March of this year. Adult education and literacy were seen. We were looked at as a need. It was very obvious when I went to committee hearings that adult education and literacy was seen as a huge need in this state. We were recognized as being horribly underfunded. And the state legislature was really trying to figure out how they could help us. And we experienced such an increase. For those of you that have heard any of my talks about this, we increased in our state funding from about 12.5 million to 20.5 million. So it was about a 64% increase. And that was the biggest increase we've had that I know of for adult education and literacy. It was a huge win. And it was because of all the hard work of Amber in the state office, our student ambassadors attending committee hearings, as well as the field. I would send emails to the field, and there was such a huge response. There were phone calls, there were emails, there was constant communication with state legislators to the point where they said, "Yes, we know, we heard, we get it." And we need that to continue. And it was just really wonderful to see that. So that was one of my highlights for sure, was just that success that we saw in the legislative session. Another highlight for me was our student ambassador training back in February during the joint MPAEA and NMEA conference, because we had recruited another cohort of students for the second time in a big way. This was our third cohort, but it was our second cohort where we had a large group that was very motivated, very active, and it was the most connected I think a cohort has ever been. On top of that, aside from the 7 that were trained in February, we had another 3 trained in April, and so we have a total of 10 that are going through our student ambassador cohort right now. So just that whole experience, both at the February training and in Dallas for the Students as Leaders Summit at COABE, was really impactful. We have seen more student engagement than I think we've ever seen as a whole cohort, and that's been really wonderful. The last thing I will say is, as far as the podcast is concerned, the biggest highlight for me was starting with our episode where we shared our stories, Nadia, and that, I believe, released in February. And the response that we got was such that we created the My Adult Ed Story feature, the web page that links to individual pages. And for those of you that haven't seen it, please go to the NMEA website, go to the podcast page. You'll see My Adult Ed Story. It's linked right there. It's amazing to me, the responses that we've received, the stories, the submissions that we've received, getting to read those stories and talk to these practitioners and being able to share their stories in a way that was visual and meaningful, and getting their feedback once they were able to see that, I think has been really great. And I look forward to just that continuation of that piece. For those of you that don't know, you can submit your practitioner stories, why you got into the field, how you got into the field. You can submit those at any time. It's a rolling feature. And I just love how we have been able to highlight that on our website in a way that really emphasizes the kind of people that are in this field. It gives all of those faces more color, more meaning. And I just am so happy that that got started and that it's continuing. And again, just look forward to being able to do more of that. So those, in a nutshell, were my highlights for the past year.
Well, that was gonna be one of my highlights, so you kinda took mine. Yeah. Honestly, I just feel like I'm still in this weird place of trying to process my whole year because there's just been so much change and trying to put together a highlight reel in my brain was just something like I really struggled with because it just feels like so much has changed in my personal and professional life. And I'm like so fast. Everything keeps going so fast. I will say one of the biggest highlights, I would say it's a much smaller scale, I guess, to an extent. It is going to COABE, this year's COABE, which was in Dallas, and just seeing so many New Mexico people there. And the thing is, I don't know if this year or the year after, the next few years, we're gonna see that level of participation. But it was incredible, and we even took a picture with as many people as we could, and I think there was, like, 30 people that showed up just to take a picture altogether. We were scrambling trying to text as many New Mexico people that we knew that were at the conference. So there were people that we missed, absolutely. But that was just so inspiring of in the sense of, like, that being able to travel to a national conference. I know that's not in everyone's budgets, let alone, like, reality, but that was an incredible experience, and those conferences always just give me a lot of excitement and hope of what's to come and what we're learning together. I'm a personal learning coordinator, a learning professional, so that's kind of like my thing of just so exciting. And, like, on a smaller scale, we really transitioned. I'm the manager leading the adult team, and we transitioned a lot of our projects to being sort of trying to be more asynchronous or have more options online. And one of the biggest things was microlearning. Microlearning is just such hit right now. It's in the zeitgeist. People really are looking for a short form, listen or do as you can learning, right? Or even just in time learning. So, what was exciting about that is just seeing what we can do in its completely different format that's not in person or synchronous online events. So that was just some big highlights. As for the podcast, I would absolutely say that My Adult Ed Story was such a great project. It's still ongoing. It's not was, it is. One of my primary goals for this podcast was to really give space to practitioners. I can't emphasize that enough. Students are so important. I never want to take away from that. But when we're looking at a bigger stage, a national stage, it's students, students, students. And we are here too. And this is probably, I'm sure this is written about in the social services field, is the people that work in the field kind of get lost in that. Like, there's some really amazing, inspiring, and fantastic work that's being done in programs that we don't always know about, simply because there's just not that platform. So giving people a platform to be able to talk about why they're in this field, what drives them, how they got there, I feel like that has been so incredible and just wonderful to read those stories, listen to those stories, that when we got these submissions. So exactly what you said, Jamie, of just those were some of the big highlights, the big wins that I really feel like shown in fiscal year 24-25. It's
I mean,
it could we think like the thing that's weird is like we think in terms of year ending as like literal year ending or like January 1st, right? But we also work in fiscal year and fiscal year ending, which is June 30th.
yep.
But we don't talk like that all the time. So it's kind of weird to say that because it almost does feel like a New Year's episode, which it is.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
is.
Mhm. And, I will add, when you were talking about COABE, we were really the rock stars of COABE, and I don't even say that lightly. People are still talking about the fact that we were wearing our turquoise and gold T-shirts, and I'm talking about nationally. They were wanting to get their own. They're jealous of New Mexico, and that was really great. So, yeah, I have to agree there too. The way that we showed up in Dallas was pretty extraordinary. That is
Yeah.
something to be grateful for.
I think that New Mexico is doing a lot of really interesting stuff in adult ed. Sometimes it's when things are chaotic and up in the air, it's hard to just remember that and appreciate it. And I think
Mhm.
that's where like it is scary. No, not trying to take away from anyone's fears or belittle that, but there
Right?
are also a lot of really incredible stuff happening.
Yeah.
And people are noticing. I did have at different conferences, different states talk to me about like, oh yeah, New Mexico. We just heard New Mexico passed this latest thing, or there's this new project, and I'm like, yeah, New Mexico is really doing incredible stuff. So I'm
Oh, yeah.
always happy to represent our state. So one of the things, we talked about highlights. So those were like kind of our victory laps, right? What
Mhm.
was your biggest lesson learned or takeaway from the last fiscal year, Jamie?
I think for a lot of things, whether it's podcast planning or advocacy planning, my biggest takeaway this year, and I think even in prior years, is plan early, plan often. And I think that's still even a good thing. I think I had been trying to, in a lot of different projects I was working on, plan things much further in advance. We, as NMEA, I say we, NMEA and Propel, we've learned over the years that the earlier we plan certain things, the better the outcomes are. The earlier we get out announcements, the better response we get. And I found that the earlier we got started with advocacy work, in other words, in the summer, instead of waiting till the fall, getting that done in the summer into the fall and then into the legislative session was crucial. Getting podcast episodes planned out 2 or 3, 4 months in advance, even further. I think we had planned a lot of our episodes even for the full fiscal year by maybe August. The more that we were able to plan those and get interviews scheduled and then get the audio kind of in a bank so that I could get them edited early, that was the better thing. I think we even got to a point where everything was ready, the episode was ready, and it was a week or even more before it was going to be released, and we were excited about it, we were ready, and it was interesting to have it ready and then not be able to release it for a week. So, that, I think, to me, was just my biggest takeaway, is to, no matter what kind of project you're doing, plan as early as you can and plan as much as you can so that you get the best results possible.
I like that. Plan early, plan often.
Mhm.
Huge. Yeah, and I can't emphasize how hard that can be sometimes, and to even suggest that can sometimes lead to resentment in a way. Like, "Do you have any idea what's on my plate?" It's like,
You're
"Really?"
right, that can be hard. I think we spend a lot of time, and I say we as in the whole field, no matter your position, you spend a lot of time going, "Okay, what's due first? Because that's what I have to work on and get that done so I can move on to other things." And the idea of planning even further ahead is not always possible. So yeah, you're right. I think we can acknowledge that that's not always possible, but when it is always better in the long run to be able to do that.
Yeah, when you can. The trick, I think,
Mhm.
here is identifying what can plan ahead, because that does take work on the forefront, but in the long run, it helps you out so much. So,
Agreed.
yeah, my lessons learned is to plan for breaks and plan for breaks as often as you can. I think it was the right thing to do for me to take 2 weeks off. I had the PTO, I could do it. I think what I should have done was pad in more time during the busy months and just trying to get a day off here or there, because I was reaching a breaking point of where I could not even create content. And creating content is most of my job. So it was
Mhm.
taking so long to do things that I knew I able to do faster, and I just could not. It's not even a sense of, like, laziness or will. It was literally nothing was going on in my brain, and I just sit there and trying to type out something and trying to redesign something on Canva. It took so long, and I was like, "You know what? This is my body telling me that I gotta figure this out better." Like, that's it, is just figuring this out better. And so part of that is also planning for those breaks, planning time. My partner talked to me multiple times about it, and it took a while, but finally sunk in of, okay, yeah, I'm actually doing a disservice to my staff and to my colleagues and coworkers if I don't take a break. Just pushing myself constantly to get things done doesn't mean I was doing things well. I had to redo them anyway. So, like, that's double the effort for a quality that could have been done better if I planned more time off. So, that's something that I've learned, and so it's really hard sometimes to think like that too, of like, well, I could take a break when this event is over, when that project is at this stage and whatever, but it can't always work like that. Our bodies don't work like that. We force our bodies into that mode. So, that's kinda my lessons learned.
And that is a very good lesson. I think we all need to be able to do that. Absolutely. So, we think about lessons learned or top takeaways. Those things, as well as highlights, allow us to grow. We grow in a lot of ways all the time. And so, the next thing we want to talk about is just ways that we grew professionally in the past year. So, Nadia, What ways did you grow?
It's hard. You gave me the hard question. Let me pull out this list. One thing that I will say that because I feel like I'm always kind of pushing myself to grow and in so many different ways. That's just like my one of my big values in life is personal and professional growth. I think one of the biggest things was just taking a step back and letting other people talk and contribute and be contrarian at times. And that's not always easy, especially because that's kind of like my mind is very much pattern recognition and seeing things that are like, okay, wait, this doesn't fit. This fits. What does this mean? In that way. And I kind of reached a point, and this is tied to the kind of break thing of where like my brain is just so exhausted. I couldn't do that. But when I couldn't do that anymore, other people stood up and other people spoke. And I was like, you know what? I always have to be that guy. Let's give other people the platform, the space. I don't need to fill the air with my voice all the time. And so that's kind of where I'm at right now, of just like, okay, when do I have to speak? And it's still work in progress, learning when I need to speak up and when I need to be silent.
I like that. And I think that kind of goes into this idea that you don't have to carry everything. You don't have to be the one that always does it. That if you just give other people a chance, they can rise to it. We say that about our students a lot. And so I think, yeah, that is absolutely true of our colleagues as well.
I feel like, though, and I feel like I noticed this a lot, is that we have these expectations, these ideas for our students, but we don't think of ourselves in that way. And
And
or
yet
we
we are
put
adult learners, all of us.
exactly, like, we are adult learners and the content is different, but it doesn't mean we learn differently necessarily, or that our students are special or more special than us in that regard. So
Eh,
it's always something I try to keep in mind.
Definitely. As for me, I talk about advocacy a lot. It's just a huge part of my job. And it's a part of my job that I love so very much. And I found early on when I started doing legislative advocacy that even though it made me nervous, even though it made me anxious, especially in prepping for meetings, the meetings would always go very well. Yeah, there might be some hiccups, but nothing insurmountable. And I would always leave feeling rejuvenated, feeling energized. I really loved it. That didn't always result in me getting as much done as I liked. And I feel like this year was very different in that regard. I grew a lot in the way that I was willing to more assertively take action, to attend committee hearings, to speak during public comment. I did that multiple times last fiscal year, and I had never done it before. And even just public comment at a committee hearing can be very nerve-wracking because you have 1 to 2 minutes, and they will cut you off because they set a timer. When that timer goes off, they will shut you up and they will go to the next person. And so it's kind of a skill you have to build, but I was able to do that multiple times, and I found that it had a big impact. You can see the impact on the faces of those committee members, and so being able to do that more often and build that skill and being able to see the students also, it's a really great skill to grow. I really have appreciated being able to work on that. And again, along the same vein with advocacy, federal advocacy was not ever my strongest point. I found that it was a lot easier to make connections with state legislators. In a big way, it's because on the federal level, you don't get to speak to the federal legislators as often. They are in Washington, D.C. They're very, very busy. And so you're speaking to their staffers. And so getting relationships with those federal staffers is a little bit more difficult. When all of this turmoil started happening, because this happened well before June 30th, when we heard about the skinny budget proposal and that they were proposing to cut adult education, we were asked to contact every single federal legislator And of our 5 federal legislators, I was able to get meetings with 4 of them. And what I mean is they're staffers, of course. So I was able to meet with those staffers. I had students with me. I had program directors with me. Depending on the region that they covered, we chose the students and directors based on that. And they were able to get a really good feel for adult education. We got those relationships started. So now when I am contacting them because our federal funds were completely cut and we didn't get them, I was able to say, we've spoken before. This is what's happening. Can you please make sure that Senator or Representative, XYZ does this? It's a lot easier. And so having those connections was a huge bit of growth for me. And the last thing I'll say about that is I attended a town hall, and this was in, I believe, early June. It might have been in May, that was hosted by Senator Ben Ray Lujan and Representative Melanie Stansberry. And I was given the opportunity to actually ask a question. Not everybody was able to do that. I believe there were only 4 questions asked the whole time because of the size of the audience and the things they were talking about. But I got to ask about adult education. I got to get us on their radar. And Representative Stansberry answered the question. I was asking what they were doing to ensure that adult education funding was not going to get cut. And she answered it very well. And I know that things like that, being able to go to town halls and ask those questions are things that they remember. So that was, I think, really big as far as my own professional growth, being able to expand what I do with advocacy to that federal level was a really great bit of growth for me this year.
Amazing. What an opportunity. And appreciate you mentioning those connections and how it wasn't your strong suit, but you still realized that value. So you pushed outside your comfort zone for
Mhm.
that.
Yeah.
It's just absolutely incredible to do.
I
Thank you for
recommend it every time.
yeah, push yourself 5 out of 5. Push yourself out of your comfort zone.
Yes.
Network with federal legislative staffers.
Yeah. The people that have the power, the voices in the ears of the people that have the power, and that's very important.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So, we talked about our highlights, our growth in the past year. Well, let's shift the gaze to our future.
Yeah.
What are some things you're looking forward to this year? What can you start us off, Jamie?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I want to acknowledge that as we're recording this, it's mid-July. Sometimes it can feel like there's not a whole lot to look forward to because there's so much unknown. There's so much anxiety and fear, and I want to acknowledge that because it's a hard thing. This is something that even though we have experienced budget cuts in the past, this is nationally something that has the potential to be catastrophic. And so it can be hard to look forward to what's upcoming. But I think that there can always be things that we can look to the future and say to ourselves, yes, I want to make this happen, or this is something that I'm really looking forward to. And one of those things that I'm really looking forward to in the upcoming year is our annual conference. We have not had a New Mexico state conference just for New Mexico since the fall of 2023. It's been 2 years because our last conference was joint with MPAEA. And we decided this year that we wanted to be a little different. We wanted to have some panel discussions. We wanted to have some guided discussions. We wanted to have poster sessions. We also had an option for 5 by 5 presentations, although at this point and the deadline for presentations has passed and nobody proposed a 5 by 5 session. But we did get several poster session submissions, and we got several double session submissions, and we have some guided discussions that we have planned. And so I think it's going to be a different feel. And one thing that Amber made it clear to me last week is that she wants to try to support programs as much as possible in making sure that we're all together in Albuquerque in September for our annual conference. And I would really like to emphasize that I know that budget cuts mean that travel is one of the first things cut. I get that. I totally understand that. I hope that there's still a way for programs to make it to the annual conference as much as possible, to send as many people as possible. We are a small field. We are a very tightly knit field. And every year, these conferences seem like a reunion of friends in a lot of ways. And I think that we need each other so much right now. It's very easy to feel despondent. It's very easy to feel like there's no hope, that things are going to just get worse. And when we take the time to see each other in person, to connect with each other, learn from each other, share ideas with each other, vent with each other. We can complain to each other about what's happening. We know, we understand, we empathize. When we have that opportunity to do it in person, it gives us a recharge. It gives us a boost. It gives us that determination and drive to keep going in the midst of being misunderstood, disregarded, and cast aside by this current administration. It's a hard thing to take in, but we're not alone in doing that. And so, if for no other reason than to be able to connect with each other and be there with and for each other, the conference is so much more essential. And so I'm really looking forward to having that opportunity because we really just don't know how many of these opportunities we're going to have. So conference, conference. I really hope that you guys all go. It's going to be a wonderful experience. So aside from that, I really do look forward to being able to highlight more practitioner stories in the My Adult Ed Story feature. Normally, we don't have episodes in July and in January. And one thing, Nadia, that you and I had talked about is during these months, we especially highlight the stories that have been newly added since the last time. And so I want to see how many. I'm challenging people, I think. I want to see how many stories we can get between now and January. Let's see. I think everybody has a story worth sharing. So please, I hope that you guys share your stories, share your photos, whether they're written or audio recorded. We'll work with both or either or. I just love it. So, yeah, that's what I'm looking forward to this year.
Yeah. One of the hardest things that I keep coming across is that there's this idea that my story isn't interesting. I don't think that's true at all. Everyone has
Well,
an interesting point, and I think that's just self-doubt coming in. In addition, I think you mentioned this earlier, we are more than willing to work with people. If you have a story to share and you're not sure about it, we can work with you to flesh it out. Just reach out. We love to do there's a private session, not recorded, where we just talk to you about what's your story, what do you want to highlight, and we'll work with you. We're friendly. Um,
absolutely.
yeah. So, what things am I looking forward to this year? So, some of the biggest things, and this comes from this kind of restraint and this fear. So, the restraint, I mean, in terms of limits, in terms of budgets and the unknown. I do look forward to the conference too, because that really is our place to reconnect with the community. 'Cause we are a community. So then it's hard to remember that when it's just so bogged down by external events or just focused on our work. And people were so much stronger than we're all together. So I really look forward to just seeing people in person again. And these events, people come up to me who I don't even remember meeting and just know who I am. Like, just because of this podcast, and I just show up to these events because part of my job. And the benefit of that, what I'm saying is just like, there's been more of that comfort of like, oh, I'm kind of familiar with you. And that to me is just powerful in itself, which means that, like, one, people are paying attention. What Propel is doing, what Nivea is doing, people are paying attention. And two, there's that creating that comfort of like, oh, I could reach out, I could talk to you. I could tell you what I'm thinking right now. And I've had some really valuable conversations simply because people felt that in that moment. It's so powerful. I've had conversation with people who just didn't really think anything that they're doing is interesting or important and just but felt like, "Oh, Nadia talked about this or Nadia does this thing. Hey, let me pick your brain." And they I can't think of anything very specific right now, but just the incredible creativity that people really have that don't recognize how powerful that is. And I'm just so amazed every time. There is nothing that people tell me that is mundane or boring or irrelevant. Everything that people come up to me and just like, "Oh, hey, I have a thought," or "This is what I'm doing." Even me asking questions, "Oh, yeah, I'm doing this." No one has ever told me something that is nonsense or dumb or uninteresting. It's always wonderful here. And we really look
Absolutely.
that creativity is how we're going to thrive beyond survive, right?
Yes.
But yeah, so also more I guess more specifically is again because of this constraint with budgets and this unknown, we're really trying to dive into creatively how can we reach people? And we have stuff in the works of Propel working on more asynchronous content as well as just more online opportunities. I'm so excited about it. One thing I can talk about is we are working on just AI itself of just like how can we support people in their growth in using large language models. So I can't say anything more on that simply because that's actually not my forte in the sense I'm the manager. I'm like, okay, I'm going to hear your ideas. This is the big picture. This is what we work on. How can I support you? And then my team is coming up with amazing ideas. And I'm just like, this is great. This is absolutely
That's
fantastic.
exciting.
It
Yeah.
really is. So we're trying using our formats that we have, our Tech Tuesdays, our Mental Health Mondays is working with AI, trying to remove that layer of fear. There's a lot of fear with unknowns. There's also a lot of questions of like what are ethical considerations. And I think the way we talk about ethics is moral as like there's a right or a wrong way, but ethics is an action in process. It's what does this mean in this state? And that's kind of like what we're thinking about of what does it mean to have this fairly new technology on almost everything now. Every company has a version of AI that they're working on that can do different things. And what does this mean in our jobs? I'm very excited about it. So yeah, I'm excited just about through that constraint, we do have opportunities. We have opportunities to be creative. So I'm very excited about that.
I love that. That should be our motto. Through constraint, there are opportunities to be creative. I love that. Even if it's just out of necessity, it is absolutely true.
Yeah. So those are some of the stuff that we're pretty excited about. What's one goal that you have for the fiscal year, Jamie?
This is lofty. Not going to lie. It's lofty. But my goal is to somehow get back that $5 million lost in federal funding. Don't know how exactly. And I think that it's going to have to come from a number of sources. Hopefully, some of it could come from state funding. There's no guarantee of that, of course. But there are a lot of things that COABE is doing. There are a lot of things that we're doing on a state level. There are a lot of things that many states are doing to try to get those funds either given out by the federal government as they were allocated by Congress, so to actually get the federal government to release those funds, or, like I said, to get them from other sources. And so this is, I think, going to be my one opportunity to remind folks that when I send an advocacy email, please do take action. There's a lot of campaigns that COABE has started. There's a lot of action items that you can do, your students can do. There's a call for student videos and other stories. So when you get those emails, whether they're from me or from COABE, please take action. The more people that speak up, the better. And I will continue to work with Amber and the state office. I will continue working with COABE. And even MPAEA is getting involved. The president of MPAEA is very active and participatory. And so he makes it a point to send out communications on behalf of MPAEA. And so I really want for all of those cumulative actions to make that difference and to get that money that we lost. That is my goal, as lofty as it may be.
That's ambitious. That's so ambitious.
Yes.
I just, I don't know, I was picturing, like, whatever getting that money wherever it looks like from many sources, and I was just like, "Is Jamie gonna rob a train?
A casino?
A
No,
casino?" Wow,
I
poor
am
adult
I will emphasize there will be no no illegal activities happening in that end, but we do have a very supportive state. We are very lucky. There are some states that have 0 state funding, so the loss of federal funding means that programs have shut down. We did not shut down. We are slowing down a little bit in that we have to cut the budgets in certain places. That's not anything new. We've done that before. We are not experiencing a complete shutdown of services like some states are. We are not being told, well, there's enough money to continue working for about a month or 2, and then you're going to have to find another job. We're not being told that. We're lucky in that respect. So, because we have these legislators that understand the importance of adult education and literacy, thanks to all the work that was done during the legislative session, thanks to all of you and all of the phone calls and emails that you sent, that made a difference. That put us in a position where, yes, we are feeling the burn. We absolutely are. But we are not dead. And not every state can say that. So, getting that $5 million back, whether it's from the federal money that was supposed to go anyway or from the state, it's possible. We just have to try to find different ways and to be creative about it.
I really appreciate your dedication to this ideal, this hope. It is lofty. I don't think that lofty means completely unimaginable. I think we do
Mhm.
have to be in the ideal at times because that's how you really strive further. Yeah, which I think is funny because I'm actually at the opposite end of that, of like, I'm just trying to maintain course of like, make sure we are getting the content that we need out, that we are supporting the programs in their professional learning because it's so hard to like prioritize professional learning when we're trying to just hold things together. But I think there's so much benefit to professional learning, particularly as professionals. Like, if we're not working and honing our skills, it's a disservice to our students, it's a disservice to ourselves.
Oh,
So
yeah.
my thing is making sure that I get everything I need to get done. My team is working on what they need to. They have their projects lined up and making sure that professional learning is a space that people can grow and grow together. That's something that I've been trying to think of. Like, we have all these ideas and these new projects up in the air, but one of the biggest thing is trying to maintain that community feel. And so keeping ourselves together as community, that's my goal, which is very vague and broad.
No, but I think that that is super important. When there's so much upheaval and unknowns and fears, having things that can still be consistent and there, and knowing that there is professional learning, no matter what, there are going to be these offerings that are going to be there, that there are things that can be counted on is essential. I think even more essential now than ever. So
I
I don't think
appreciate
that's a
that.
small goal at all.
Oh, it's small, but maybe not just maybe not super creative in that sense, but behind the curtain, guys. There is creativity trying to create these new methodologies of professional
Mhm.
learning where we can have that more connection. I think we need connection now more than ever. It's so important.
Absolutely. 100%. And I
Okay.
think that that's a good place to wrap up from.
Yeah, I think so. I have a we have our hopes, we have our goals. We have
Mhm.
our things to look forward to. Jamie, thank you for your time. And just a reminder to please like and subscribe the podcast. Keep up to date with the latest information and episodes. Please, if you haven't already, submit your story. Your story is
Yes.
so vital. And it's a way to reconnect to the field and to show I am here. This is who I am. This is the work I do. This is what I'm proud of. Because you are proud to work in this field. We all know that. No one gets into adult ed for the money.
Nobody.
Nobody at
Not a
all.
single person.
No. If you do get into it for the money, I think you're on the wrong course.
Your bar is quite low, yes. Mhm.
No.
In addition to that, though, aside from your stories, if you have any ideas for episodes, let us know. We would love to hear your ideas because we want to know what you would like to hear, what you would like to see. Let us know.
Yes, we have a feedback form on our website, which you could find. You could also reach out to me or Jamie. So reach out if you're in New Mexico, reach out to our adult ed listservs. You can reach out to me on LinkedIn. You can email me, which is available, but there are options. Please let us know what direction, what topics, what themes you want us to cover. There's no such thing as a really bad idea. I'd like to believe that. So I'm gonna stick to it.
Yes, I agree.
Tell us anything that you're thinking of. Thank
Yes.
you.
Thank you, and we look forward to season 3.
Connect with Adult Ed, the NMEA podcast, is a project of the Propel Professional Learning System and is funded by the New Mexico Higher Education Department's Adult Education Division. Thank you for listening.